This is Psychosocial Problems Part 3, Substance Use and Abuse. Before we get into this, something absolutely worth saying that is noted by your textbook author, and that is, I think it's really interesting that there is such an inconsistent way in which we as a society view substances. For some reason, we have an arbitrary number which has changed over the years for when some substances are legal and some are not. We also have situations where it's socially acceptable to act one way but not in another. So, for example, you can go to the dispensary at 21 years and in 0 days old, but you can't go and purchase from the dispensary at 20 years and 364 days old, right? It's just, there's an arbitrary number. Same thing with alcohol. It's totally fine to have a couple of glasses of wine and unwind after a hard day at work, in the evening. But why? It's okay to drink in excess as long as you're socially doing so and there's a reason to do so, like at a birthday or, 4th of July out at the beach or whatever. It just, taking some drugs is okay, but others are not. It's sending a really inconsistent and confusing message to our young people, and definitely worth noting. Okay, let's talk about drugs of choice. So by the time adolescents are seniors in high school, 59% of them will have tried alcohol, 44% will have tried marijuana, 41% will have vaped nicotine, 22% will have smoked a cigarette, 5% will have tried an illicit drug. And by the way, these are very comparable between the sexes. This brings up a very important point. Did you hear me say tried? These statistics are all about trying these substances, not about using and abusing these substances. And we know that just trying something once is so completely different than having it ruin your life. So I think that's just kind of, again, worth noting. Something else, hey, alcohol and tobacco use, much higher in adolescents in Europe, but illicit drug use is nearly doubled that in the United States for adolescents as it is in Europe. Okay, let's take a peek at some 2021 data from the CDC. I'm choosing to use this graph and not the ones in your book. They are pretty similar, but again, just a little bit different. I'm going to err on the side of the CDC for this. And this graph does a nice job at kind of breaking it down a few times per decade, but this is only high school students, so this is not all adolescents. Okay, a couple of other things about this graph. Alcohol use, so that pink line in the center there, that is just students, high school students who currently drink, so that's at least one drink in the last 30 days. All the other data reflects those who have ever used the substance. And when they talk about illicit drug use, which is the light blue line that kind of starts there in the center, that is cocaine, inhalants, heroin, methamphetamines, ecstasy, and hallucinogens. That's what was included in the survey. Okay, so we can kind of see that there's definitely been a downward trend, which is great over time, starting at about, 1990 or so and going to 2021. One thing that really hasn't changed that much is that green line in the center there. That's marijuana use. Trends in marijuana have really not changed all that much. Drinking has been on a nice, slow decline since the 90s. We have a couple of areas where there's small little upticks, but pretty much since about, 2007 or so, we have seen a dramatic decrease. Since the late 90s, we have seen a dramatic decrease in cigarette use, which is that dark blue line on the top. Vaping statistics didn't start coming here until after 2013, and then in 2017 to 2019, we saw this really, really big increase in vaping, and then from then on, it has decreased because we're starting to learn a lot more about vaping and its health effects. Experimentation with alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, it actually is just less common than it was 20 years ago, which is great, early substance use, that is what we really want to narrow in on when we're doing research, because that is the cause for concern. It is one of the greatest risk factors for addiction later on. Okay, let's take a peek at our 4 groups of adolescents when it comes to substance use. Frequent drug users are those who have used at least once a week. Then we have hard drug users. This is any drug that's not alcohol, tobacco, marijuana. We have those experimenters. These are those who experiment with marijuana and alcohol but do not use them frequently. And then the abstainers, those who do not use or have experimented. Something interesting is that we see that abstainers and experimenters are much better adjusted psychologically than frequent users or hard drug users. And that is probably of course, yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. But here is what doesn't. And you kind of really have to dig a little deeper to figure out why. Experimentation with substances, as long as it takes place later on in adolescence, is associated with better adjustment in young adulthood than abstaining, abusing, or using. Okay, what? When I read that, I was like, there has to be more to this. And there absolutely is. So rather than just being like, oh yeah, I take this at face value, occasional experimentation means I'm going to be better adjusted. No, these results actually indicate that there are psychological advantages observed in experimenters that were evident before they began experimenting with substances. So when they were younger, in early adolescence, childhood, middle adolescence. Also, you have to think about this. There is a confounding variable here. People who are better adjusted, have better psychological adjustment, are generally more sociable than those who are not, right? So if you're more social and you put yourself in more social situations and maybe you have more friends, then what's happening? Well, then you're going to be exposed to more people and be exposed in more situations that maybe there is drug and alcohol use around you. So again, confounding variable. Okay, what else? Well, frequent users of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs frequently score lower on measures of psychological adjustment than teenagers who do not. They're more likely to have been maladjusted as children. They're more likely to experience problems in school, suffer from psychological distress, depression, become involved in dangerous or deviant activities like crime, delinquency, truancy, and they are more likely to engage in unprotected sexual activity than those who are not frequent users. The effects of adolescent substance use also has long-lasting effects into adulthood. Individuals who are frequent users are more likely to have physical health problems, experience in adulthood, experience unemployment, have out-of-wedlock children, and continue to have substance abuse problems long-lasting in through their adult life. Okay, now hard drug users. There was nothing in your book except for the definition of this, so I had to do a little bit of outside digging. Hard drug users are generally white youth, and there is a good predictor of 10th grade hard drug use, and that is early adoption of marijuana and cigarettes. I know, the rhetoric of marijuana being the gateway drug, it is out there, but studies actually do support this. Another good indicator of 10th grade hard drug use is poor parental communication. Okay. Let's talk about how substance use, it can be a disorder, and it's defined by the DSM-5. Substance use disorder has to have the presence of at least 2 of 11 criteria, and it's clustered into 4 groups. And those groups are impaired control, social impairment, risky use, and pharmacological dependence. Okay, so we are actually going to stop this now because we're 10 minutes in, and we're going to continue substance use and abuse in the next video.